Imagine my delight when I got an actual question from a friend of mine on Facebook through direct message. Greetings, Earthlings. I'm Dr. Will, and welcome to Dr. Will Presents. There were actually 3 questions. One was on life planning fundamentals. One was on putting away the things of the child. And the last one was on games, in particular Dungeons and Dragons and video games. Now, if you'd like more content like this, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell below so that you'll get notified when there's new content. Wow, so from the very general to the very specific. And thank you, Marie, for the questions, because as I always say at the end, a conversation is more interesting than a monologue, even mine. Now, I won't have time to talk about all 3 of these questions this week. I'll take them one at a time, starting with the most specific questions about games, Dungeons and Dragons, and video games in particular. Marie writes, I have a strong bias against video games and games like Dungeons and Dragons, and it's my stubborn opinion that grown men and grown women need to let go of them and leave them to the teenagers. And as a person who created a board game, it would be interesting to hear your thoughts. So yes, I did create a board game once upon a time with help from friends of mine, and we tried to fund it with a Kickstarter twice, and it never got off the ground. It was an abstract memory game based on a structure called the McCunks by a friend of mine, Dr. Aaron Ralby of Linguisticator. He invented the structure, and we were trying to build a game around that structure. Part of what I learned from people wise in the ways of Kickstarter-funded board games is that abstract games and memory games tend to not do well. So I had 2 strikes against me just getting started. So we started out with 2 strikes against us. Anyway, it never got off the ground, but I did learn a lot about board game creation. I briefly played Dungeons and Dragons D&D in my ute. Yes, I did say ute. But I gravitated more towards abstract games, chess in particular. I'm presently teaching chess in a homeschool co-op and have started taking lessons from a national master in order to improve my game and improve my ability to teach the kids how to play well. It was one of my goals when I was younger to become a master at chess, and it's something I've resuscitated now that I'm no longer a child. So enough about me. What about the games themselves? Games are a form of entertainment. Sorry for being master of the obvious there. But the fundamental question becomes, what is the role of entertainment in our lives? What's the appropriate role of entertainment in our lives? Time is the raw material of our lives. And given the time that we have and our talents and resources, we try to make of our lives what we can. Now, games, or play in general, is one of what Richard Bowles, the author of What Colors Your Parachute, which is the job hunting guide, calls the 3 boxes of life: play, education, and work. He argues that we make a mistake when we relegate each of those activities to age-based boxes. So, for example, we play as children, then we get educated, and then we work, and then you die. He argues that we should spread those activities out across our life in general. It's true you'll spend a large part of your childhood in play, and then a large part of the next segment of your life in education. Then work absorbs a lot of our time. During that later part of your life, while you're working, you should also be mixing in some play and some education. I think that most thoughtful people would agree that folks should be lifelong learners. One of the goals of Adler's Paideia proposal is to make people lifelong learners. And people need to work, not only to earn their daily bread. People as people need work to be complete. One of the great disasters of unemployment is that you lose that. But what about play? Play as in sports, doing sports, or a physical game like golf, or a mental game like chess is in fact part of what it means to be human. Early in life, we learn a lot through our play. We learn how to do things, how to think about things, if we're lucky, how to be a good sport, how to solve complex problems and visualize things, how to use our imagination. Now, it would be a long vlog to go into all the different kinds of games there are out there. One of the things that you should notice is that there are a lot of games out there. Why are there a lot of games out there? Because it's so natural to us as human beings to play. I'll just mention a few basic categories of games. There are abstract games like chess and Go. There are Euro games that are very popular these days, things like Settlers of Catan. There are role-playing games like Dungeons and Dragons, and video games like Halo and Call of Duty, and then of course card games, bridge, cribbage, and Texas Hold'em, you name it. And there are a lot of other kinds of games as well. But Marie's specific question was about Dungeons and Dragons, D&D, and video games. D&D as a role-playing game is social and interactive. It's kind of like improv acting, where players are provided a scenario and they act out what the characters that they represent are doing in that scenario, or they describe what they're doing. As such, it exercises the imagination in ways that watching TV, surfing the internet can't possibly do. In the spectrum of healthy and useful activities, it is healthier than watching television and surfing the internet. Arguably, it's not any more productive than those activities. D&D is more social and interactive than reading a novel, but it makes demands on the imagination like reading does. Depending on the quality of the person acting as dungeon master, it can range anywhere from pulp fiction to bestseller type quality, but probably not as good as a great book like the Brothers Karamazov or Crime and Punishment. Can't imagine playing a role-playing game of Crime and Punishment, can you? Video games, pew pew pew. In the best of the genre, you're exercising judgment, making plans, executing those plans, and changing those plans as you run across various parts of the scenario. Makes it an activity that is, in my mind, still better than watching TV or surfing the web and that sort of thing. My bottom line is that games, as games, are some of the better forms of entertainment out there. You can learn a lot within the context of a game by exercising your creative intellect. You learn and exercise those skills and improve in them. And many games, board games for example, have a social and interaction dynamic that's important and useful and good for people. And that's all good, assuming you're not an uncongenial person or you're not playing with one. All that said, games are enjoyable, and they'd be a pretty crummy form of entertainment if they weren't. The danger here is you could lose balance. Let's say you have a fairly cut and dry job, not the soul-crushing, mind-numbing disaster of a job that you might have where you should be spending all of your free time finding a new job or learning the skills that you need in order to acquire a new job. But let's say within that context that you're spending more and more and more time on games. Maybe spending some of your time at work on games, entirely forsaking learning activities or activities that make you better in your profession or your trade. If that's you, then I'd recommend you put games aside for a while until you regain some balance. Just like if you were a workaholic, an ergophile, or permanent grad student, you need to find balance in your life so that you don't become stuck in one of those boxes. Play, learn, work. All are important, but all must be in balance. A conversation is more interesting than a monologue, so send me a note or put a comment below, and I will get back to you. That's it for me, for you, for now. Thanks for joining me. Be careful out there. I'll be seeing you. Bye.